It was the third Thursday in November, cold enough to see your breath in St. Paul, just warm enough to fool you into thinking winter hadn't settled in for good. The kind of gray-skied afternoon where everything looks like it's been left out in the cold a little too long. The lawyer's office was tucked between a bakery and an insurance agency. All three buildings suffering the same tired brick and vinyl siding. No signage on the windows. No warmth in the waiting room. I sat in a chair that pretended to be leather. It made a soft hissing noise every time I shifted. Across from me, behind a desk too large for the size of the room, the family attorney, Harold Gleason, flipped through a thick folder of documents with the lazy authority of someone who already knew the outcome. He wasn't reading, he was stalling, letting the words settle before delivering the sentence. Lauren sat beside me, not close, not touching, a hand's width of space between us, filled with all the things she wasn't saying. Her legs were crossed, one heel bobbing rhythmically in the air, and her hands, always expressive in conversation, were clasped tight in her lap like they were afraid they might betray her. I'd asked why she wanted me to come to this meeting. She said it was just a quick review. Said the lawyer had some suggestions for the estate, for simplification, for peace of mind. All lies, I see now. Smoothed over words meant to keep me from asking real questions. I walked in thinking it was a routine check-in. I walked out knowing I'd been removed. The phrase came near the end. Gleason didn't look at me when he said it. It would be easier for everyone if you stepped back from financial decisions for a while. Not we recommend. Not have you considered. Just a polite execution. The sentence hung there like a noose. I looked at Lauren. She didn't flinch. No protest. No surprise. Just the same quiet posture of a woman who had already accepted the terms of my disappearance. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was an unveiling. They had already made the decision. I was just there to hear it spoken aloud, to absorb the final blow, quietly, cleanly, in a professional office where anger would seem uncivilized. The lawyer used the word everyone. Easier for everyone. I didn't ask who everyone was. I didn't need to. Lauren was in on it. So was he. Maybe even the kids, in some way I hadn't yet discovered. I'd been excluded, wrapped in polite tones and legal phrases, and handed the illusion of choice. But the exit door had already been opened. All that remained was for me to walk through it. I nodded, not in agreement, in recognition, like a man watching his own reflection fade from a mirror, knowing he had no control over the vanishing. It didn't start that day. It started months before. But I hadn't wanted to see it. It began with the accounts. Quietly, subtly. A bill paid before I saw the statement. An alert that said, "Your payment has been received," though I hadn't logged in. At first, I was grateful. Thought maybe Lauren was stepping in, taking some of the weight off. For years, I'd carried everything. Mortgage, insurance, tuition for kids that weren't mine. If she was finally taking initiative, wasn't that a good thing? That's what I told myself. But the pattern grew. I'd bring up a charge I didn't recognize, and she'd dismiss it. "I already handled that," she'd say. Or, "Don't worry, I've got it." Money conversations began ending faster than they started. "We're fine. Everything's covered. Let's not get into this right now." She said them like they were kindnesses, like she was protecting me. But they weren't shields, they were walls. There were new passwords I didn't recognize. Bank logins reset for security. Emails rerouted. Mail that used to come addressed to both of us now bore only her name. I asked once, jokingly, why she changed the credit card login. "Oh, it was acting weird," she said. "I fixed it. You can still get in." But when I tried, it said my access was restricted. I brought it up again. "Do we really need two people managing this stuff?" She replied, "It's just easier if I handle it." That word again. Easier. I didn't fight it. I told myself she was trying to help. That maybe she was finally stepping into the role I'd begged her to fill for years. A partner. Not a spectator. Not a bystander. Someone who carried the weight with me. But now I see what it really was. Replacement. Removal by kindness. Erosion by convenience. I should have paid more attention when the shared budget spreadsheets stopped syncing. When she began prefacing things with, "My lawyer says," instead of, "We should," I should have looked closer when her phone started lighting up with notifications from institutions I hadn't heard from in months. Banks I never dealt with. Services I'd once paid for suddenly marked inactive. But I was tired. God, I was so tired. Tired of working long hours so Lauren's kids could attend the schools she wanted. Tired of stretching paychecks so their rooms could be repainted every year to match their shifting teenage identities. Tired of giving and giving and giving and being told in 100 silent ways that I was just the man who paid for things. And yet I kept telling myself I was part of a family. That this was just what families did. That one day they'd see it. They'd thank me. The attorney pushed a form across the table. Something about asset review. Something about simplifying points of contact. It didn't say removal, but that's what it was. My name, once listed first on every account, was now an afterthought. Sometimes absent entirely. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. He just waited. Lauren still hadn't said a word. There was something surgical in the way she sat. Not cruel, just precise. Like a decision made long ago and now being executed cleanly. There was no room for questions. No room for bargaining. So I signed. Not because I agreed, but because I finally understood. I was no longer a decision maker. I was a donor. And now, even that role had been deemed too close to the throne. On the drive home, Lauren didn't speak. She stared out the passenger window like the city didn't belong to her anymore. Like she was watching the past fade behind us. Or maybe she was just avoiding my face. The car ride was 22 minutes of silence, broken only by the soft hum of the tires on asphalt. I looked at her once. She didn't turn her head. At a red light, I asked, quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" She blinked, like she'd forgotten I was there. Then, after a pause too long to be honest, she said, "It just made sense. You've been so busy." That was the justification. Busy. As if years of labor and sacrifice had disqualified me from having a voice in the very structure I built. I nodded, looked back at the road, and kept driving. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on. It flickered slightly, a bulb I hadn't yet replaced. A small, neglected thing. I stared at it longer than I should have. Lauren got out without a word and went inside. I stayed in the car for a while, and in that stillness, it hit me. This house, this family, this whole fragile thing we'd built was already slipping away. Not with a scream, not with a betrayal I could point to, but with soft phrases, gentle exclusions, and a meeting in a law office where I was told, plainly and calmly, that things would be easier without me. The phrase didn't hit me all at once. It unraveled over hours. I kept replaying it in my head after that meeting. Step back from financial decisions. It sounded so harmless, didn't it? Like a vacation, like a breather, as if I were being offered rest. But it wasn't rest. It was exile. By the time we got home, the house already felt different. Not in any physical way. The furniture was the same, the lights still warm, the thermostat set to Lauren's preferred 71 degrees. But the air had changed, felt stiller, like the rooms were holding their breath, waiting for me to notice that something had already shifted, and that it could no longer be undone. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge out of habit. The usual groceries were there. Organic milk, yogurts I didn't eat, kale. The same brands Lauren always bought, always with my money, but now labeled in my mind as hers. My stomach turned at the sight. I closed the fridge, stood there in the middle of that room like a guest too afraid to sit down. Lauren had gone upstairs without a word. The soft thud of the bedroom door told me I was no longer expected to follow. I stood in the dark kitchen, my hands resting on the counter, and I felt it, the full shape of the removal. Not an argument, not a blowout, just disappearance, a methodical erasure. I went to the garage and got in my truck. I needed air, noise, a distraction. I told myself I was just going out for groceries, even though I hadn't been asked to. There was no list, no need. I just wanted to feel useful for something. I wanted to swipe my card and see that it still meant something. I drove to the store, walked the aisles in silence, threw things into the cart that made no sense together: batteries, shaving cream, a frozen lasagna, apples I wouldn't eat. At checkout, I pulled out my wallet and slid the card without thinking. Declined. I blinked. The cashier tried to hide her awkwardness, glancing around like I dropped something embarrassing. "Want to try again?" she offered, too cheerful. I tried again. Same result. I stepped aside, pulled out my phone, opened the banking app. Re-verification required. Please contact customer service. I tried the joint account we'd used for years, the one tied to the mortgage, the one that Lauren and I used for everything from groceries to Christmas gifts. Account access restricted. No warning, no alert, just a quiet shutting of the door. I stood there, in the fluorescent lighting of a half-empty store, with strangers walking past me like I didn't exist, and for the first time, I realized that stepping back wasn't a pause. It was a quiet removal. I left the cart in the aisle and walked out. Didn't say a word to the cashier. Just drifted out into the freezing night air, the wind cutting through my jacket like I deserved it. Back in the truck, I tried calling Lauren. Straight to voicemail. I stared at the dashboard, the pale blue glow of the radio display telling me the time: 7:53 p.m. A Thursday. Just another weeknight. But everything felt wrong. I didn't go straight home. I drove, aimless, through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, past houses with warm windows and dogs barking inside. I drove until the gas light came on. Even then, I didn't stop. I kept going until the needle dipped below empty, until the roads grew dark and unfamiliar, until I couldn't pretend anymore. Eventually, I turned back, pulled into the driveway on fumes. The porch light was off. A small thing but deliberate. Lauren always left it on when she expected me. I entered the house quietly. No one was downstairs. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch in her robe, scrolling her phone like she hadn't just cut the floor out from under me. She looked up, mildly surprised to see me. "Hey," she said, her tone light. Too light. "You were gone a while." "My card got declined," I said. She blinked once. "Oh, that's weird. My account is locked." "Oh," she said again, slower this time. "Well, that's just temporary." "Temporary?" I repeated. She shifted on the couch, setting her phone down like she was about to explain something that required sympathy but not truth. "It's what the specialists recommended." I frowned. "Specialists?" She nodded. "Financial advisors. Estate consultants. They said with everything going on, it would be safer this way." Safer. I said it like I didn't understand, even though I did. Of course I did. Not safer for me. Safer from me. I was a liability now, a variable to be controlled. They hadn't taken me out of the system. They'd fortified the system against me. Lauren gave a half smile, the kind she used when she wanted to end a conversation before it began. "It's not personal." That was the moment it hit me. They'd prepared for this. There had been meetings, documents, quiet signatures I never saw. They'd planned it all down to the phrasing. Step back. Temporary. Not personal. The house was quiet as she went back to her phone, scrolling like the conversation had already ended. I stood there in the threshold of the living room, staring at the woman I'd married, the life we'd built, and saw, finally, that it wasn't mine anymore. I went to my office, shut the door, sat down at the desk, pulled out a file from the cabinet, the one labeled records, mortgage statements, tax returns, tuition receipts, car titles, insurance binders. My name was on all of it. That's when the inventory began. Not the kind with a calculator or spreadsheet. This was a reckoning, a tally of debts owed and sacrifices made. I flipped through paper after paper, highlighting how many systems still leaned on my credit, my signature, my employment. The house? My name. The car Lauren drove? My loan. The health insurance the kids used? My employer. The line of credit for emergency repairs? My account. The college fund? My deposits. They wanted me out, but only on paper, not in function. I was expected to remain the foundation, the structural support, just without access, without say, without voice, a ghost who paid the bills. I stayed up late, combing through every document, marking every instance where I was both the beginning and the end of their comfort. Lauren said it wasn't personal, but everything in that stack said otherwise. She wanted my resources, not my presence. They had built a fortress with my bricks and locked me out of it. I sat there for hours in silence. The only sound was the hum of the desk lamp, the occasional creak of the floorboards above. Reminders that the house I'd paid for was still alive, still warm, still lived in. But not by me. Not really. By midnight, I wasn't tired. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I understood, finally, that I hadn't been removed. I'd been harvested, used for what I could give, and once the giving was done, sidelined. Left outside the door with just enough kindness to make me question whether I was imagining it. I turned off the lamp, closed the file, and sat in the dark for a long time. The next day I would respond, but not with threats, not with scenes. I would do exactly what they asked. I would step back, and I would do it completely. Morning came gray and bitter, the kind of Midwest winter that seeps through the cracks of every window no matter how tightly they're shut. I barely slept. Not from rage, not even sadness, but from the simple weight of truth finally having a name. For months, maybe years, it had been circling me like a fog. Now it stood naked and solid. This wasn't stress. It wasn't miscommunication. It was replacement. When I came downstairs, Lauren was already at the counter, sipping coffee like it was any other Friday. She wore the robe I bought her last Christmas. The soft navy one, she said, made her feel like herself. I stood in the doorway and just looked at her. There was no guilt in her face, no shame, just the smooth, tired calm of someone who had made peace with her decisions long before the consequences came due. She looked up. "You want a cup?" I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, because I couldn't lie. Not even to maintain the rhythm of domestic habits that had kept us stitched together all these years. Instead, I asked, "How long?" She blinked, tilted her head slightly, playing dumb. "This whole thing," I clarified. "How long have you been planning it?" Her eyes dropped to her mug. "It wasn't like that." "Then how was it?" "It was gradual." "Like bleeding out?" She didn't answer. I stepped into the kitchen and pulled out a chair. Sat down slowly, feeling the stiffness in my back from a night of tension and desk chairs. "You called them specialists," I said. "You didn't say lawyer. You didn't say advisor. You said specialists, like I'm a risk." Lauren flinched just barely, enough for me to know I was right. "We talked to someone," she admitted, "about simplifying responsibilities, streamlining. It was never about punishing you." "Then why does it feel like a punishment?" She paused, then offered the oldest shield in the book. "It's not personal. Everything's personal when you erase someone," I said. We sat in silence after that. Just the sound of the coffee machine clicking as it cooled, the fridge humming, the wind tapping against the glass like it wanted in. Eventually, she spoke again. "We were just trying to protect the structure, the household, the kids. It's been overwhelming lately. The kids." There it was again. The phantom third party in every decision. Not mine. Not really. Just the kids. The always unspoken caveat. Every sacrifice came with it. Every budget adjustment. Every vacation compromise. Every deferred repair on the house because one of her children needed braces or books or a deposit for something life-changing. I had paid. Quietly. Repeatedly. And somewhere along the way, that silence had been mistaken for consent. "You should have told me," I said. She looked at me with something almost like pity. Would it have changed anything? I didn't answer, because yes, it would have changed everything. Not the decision, the honesty, the simple dignity of being told what was happening to my life while it was still mine. But she didn't think I needed to know. She thought I'd keep giving either way. And maybe I would have. Maybe that's the worst part. I stood, left her there with her coffee and robe and carefully curated detachment. Walked back upstairs, into the office, shut the door behind me, and began the real work. Not revenge. Not drama. Not screaming. Clarity. I pulled every file I had. Backlogged tax records. Insurance paperwork. Credit card statements. Education payments. I went through it all. Not just to see what I had given, I already knew. I wanted to see how deep the dependence ran. Because the difference between step back and step away is everything. And I was preparing to do the latter. The first document was a college payment plan. It had my name, my employer as the income source, my credit history as the collateral. Lauren had signed it, yes, but her line was second. I had put down the deposit. I had guaranteed the balance. Alex, her son, not mine, was a sophomore at a private university. Out-of-state tuition. Room and board. Meal plan. Textbooks. Flight tickets for holiday breaks. That was me. Every single line. Not out of obligation. Not out of some legal bind. Just belief. Hope. Stubborn. Father-shaped hope. He called me Mike. Never Dad. Never anything close. But when he needed money, when the dorm sent letters about overdue deposits, when his laptop died 2 weeks before finals, he didn't call Todd, his biological father. He called me, the man who was always home, always reachable, always pulling from the well of a bank account that never seemed full enough. I had funded that boy's future like it was my penance. For what? I don't know. Then there were the auto insurance documents. 2 cars. One was Lauren's. The other was Emily's, her daughter. The one who had said, 2 Christmases ago, "It's weird that we have to get you a gift. You're not even family." The premium renewal showed a 16% hike. Accident. Her fault. She never paid it. I did. Then the house. Mortgage refinanced under my name 5 years ago when Lauren's credit disqualified her. My income. My savings used for the closing costs. Her name was on the title. But the bank didn't care about names. They wanted numbers. I had the numbers. Utilities. My logins. My payments. Even the damn water softener subscription was tied to my debit card. Lauren said they wanted to simplify things. But the simplicity only ran one direction. Remove me from authority. Keep me tied to responsibility. I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by the skeletons of every choice I made to keep them comfortable. Every document signed in good faith. Every sacrifice I made so they would never feel the absence of the man who gave them DNA but nothing else. And now, the same people who had shaped their lives with my work, my presence, my sleep-deprived body, were telling me I needed to step back. No, that wasn't the truth. They were telling me I was never really part of it at all. By the time I finished cataloging everything, it was past noon. I hadn't eaten. Didn't feel like I deserved to. I sat there, numb but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Because now I knew. They needed me, but they didn't want me. They wanted my labor, my reliability, my endurance, but not my voice, not my name, not my truth. They'd built a family with me as scaffolding. But now that the house looked finished from the outside, they were dismantling the beams. Lauren wanted a foundation that didn't speak, a wallet that didn't ask questions, a man who nodded along while others made the plans. I was no longer that man. That evening, I ate dinner in silence. Lauren had made pasta, sat across from me like it was any other Friday. She asked about work. I said it was fine. We watched the news. She scrolled her phone. We both pretended, but the ledger had been written, and every debt would be called. I didn't rage. I didn't pack a bag or slam a door. I didn't give them the satisfaction of drama, of something they could twist and retell later, as if I'd gone off the rails. There was no shouting, no list of accusations, no final speech made with fists curled and voice raised. Instead, I woke early. The house was still asleep. Quiet in that way that only houses can be when the people inside believe everything is under control. Lauren's robe was still draped on the bedroom chair. Her coffee mug from the night before sat on the counter, crusted at the edges. The faint scent of her lotion hung in the hallway like a ghost of routines I no longer recognized. I brewed a pot of coffee. The machine clicked softly, sputtered to life. I didn't drink any. I let it fill just to remind myself I still could. That not everything had been taken. Then I went into the office and turned on the light. This time it wasn't about reviewing. It wasn't about adding up the years. That part was done. This was the beginning of subtraction. I started with the shared bank account, the one they had locked me out of. 3 calls, 2 hours, and one very careful phrase: I am formally withdrawing my consent for any future deposits. I transferred what little remained that came from me, my last 2 paychecks, into a separate account registered in my name alone. I left the rest untouched. What Lauren had moved or shifted before, she could keep. What she'd built without me, she could manage without me. I didn't alert her. I didn't need to. She would discover it when her balance dropped below her expectations. When the mortgage came due and my deposit didn't cushion the blow. Then I addressed the insurance policies. Health, home, auto. One by one, I called the providers and had them strip off the dependents. Not cancel, just remove unauthorized parties from my policy. Took time, verification, patience. They asked, "Are you sure?" I said, "I've never been more sure." Next came the tuition. The university portal still recognized my credentials. The school knew who the guarantor was. My name sat neatly beside the debt, highlighted in red. I drafted a single letter. No apology, no warmth, just clarity. As of this date, I am withdrawing my financial guarantee for student name redacted. All future financial obligations must be directed to the student or their alternate sponsor. I am no longer the responsible party. I sent it. Then I watched the confirmation email arrive. A weight didn't lift, it shifted. From my shoulders to theirs. For the first time in years, I was not the one bracing for collapse. I took no pleasure in these actions. They weren't vengeance. They were answers. For every locked account, I locked one of my own. For every decision made without me, I made one without them. For every door closed in my face, I found one that still opened under my own name and shut it behind me. By noon, the blueprint had changed. I was no longer the foundation. I was the man who had walked out of the basement and taken the tools with him. Lauren called around 1:15 p.m. I watched the phone ring on the desk beside me. I let it ring out. No voicemail. No follow-up text. She would wait to speak until she thought she could control the tone again. I wasn't giving her that chance. Instead, I kept going. I called the lawyer, Gleason, the one who had delivered the phrase like it was weather. I left a message. This is to confirm I've withdrawn my participation from any joint estate planning discussions. As per the suggestion that I step back from financial decisions, I have complied. All future correspondence should be directed through formal channels. Polite. Final. Then I called HR at my company. Explained I needed to update my beneficiary and emergency contacts. Removed Lauren. Removed her children. Replaced them with my brother. The one who had watched from afar all these years, quietly wondering how I'd managed to carry so much without folding. The one who had warned me once, over a cheap beer, that love can become currency if you let it. He'd been right. I was just too deep in the transaction to see it. By evening, the house felt different. Not colder, just clearer. The illusion had lifted. Lauren came home at 6:07 p.m. I heard her keys in the door. The way she walked faster than usual. The way her heels clicked like punctuation. She found me in the kitchen, eating leftovers in silence. She didn't say hello. Just, I got an alert about the account. I didn't look up. Which one? She paused. The joint. It's empty. No, just mine is gone. She set her purse down on the counter. Thudded harder than it needed to. What are you doing? I looked at her then. Not with anger. Not even disappointment. Just with the quiet acceptance of someone who'd finally caught up to the truth. I stepped back. I said. She blinked. What? You said it would be easier if I stepped back. So I did. From the accounts. From the insurance. From the tuition. From the plans. Her voice tightened. You're being petty. No, I said. I'm being precise. She stared at me for a long time, waiting, maybe, for me to flinch, to apologize, to soften like I always had. But I didn't, because something had calcified in me. Not cruelty, just boundary. She stepped closer. You're sabotaging the whole system. No, I said again, slower this time. I just stopped carrying it. She looked around the kitchen like it had betrayed her. The same kitchen she'd cooked in while texting the specialists. The same room where I'd washed their plates, filled their glasses, handed over every piece of myself so the illusion of family could continue another day. It's not just about money, she said, almost pleading now. It's about stability. Then you should have thought of that before cutting out the one person who held it. She flinched, just for a moment. I stood, placed my plate in the sink, didn't wash it, let it sit, just like everything else she'd let sit too long. As I walked past her, she grabbed my arm. Her voice was softer now. Michael, please. That name. My name. It sounded heavier than usual. I turned back to her. Our eyes locked. You wanted to lead, I said. Now you have the reins. You and your advisors, your specialists, your children. Figure it out. She let go of my arm slowly, like touching me had reminded her of something, and not a good something. A burden, maybe, a past role she no longer wanted to be cast in. I left her there in the kitchen. She didn't follow. That night, I lay in bed alone. She didn't come up. Or maybe she did and I slept through it. It didn't matter. The point had been made. The next morning, I got a call from the university. A woman in billing, her voice pleasant but nervous. She wanted to confirm the withdrawal of sponsorship. Asked if I might reconsider. Offered a payment plan. I told her to forward future inquiries to Alex's legal guardian. You were listed as his guardian, sir, she said. Not anymore, I replied. You can update that file. Click. The weekend passed in fragments. Lauren hovered but didn't engage. The kids didn't come home. Or maybe they did and stayed in their rooms. I didn't care. I began packing small things. Not as a threat, as preparation. Essentials. Paperwork. Spare keys. Things I had left untouched for too long under the belief that this house was mine. That this family was mine. But they never were. And now I was simply making that truth visible. When the first bill defaulted, the insurance payment, she texted me. They say you canceled coverage. The kids are on this plan. I replied, they're not my kids. She didn't respond. By Monday, the house had shifted again. Not physically, not decor, not layout, power. It no longer lived in the hands of those who whispered behind closed doors. It lived with the man who, for the first time in years, had stopped asking to be respected and started acting as if he already deserved it.